I'm gonna be the bell again. You did it great, Annika. People are pouring in. I think we are now coming in for a landing on day one. Nick is here to do that for us. And while people are finding their seats, I could also just inform you that before we let you go into the dinner tonight, the dinner will be served right next door at 5 o'clock. Program finishes at 4. But because you're all so beautiful, we would love to take a team picture before wrapping up today. I know some of you are traveling tomorrow, which is why we really want to take the chance to gather you all while you're here. So that's why I invite you to join me downstairs. Wolfgang will lead the way when we wrap up. He's just follow Wolfgang. We have found a beautiful spot downstairs, outdoors, gorgeous light for our team photos. So all participants, guests are invited to join. It will be such a wonderful way to make this moment last forever. But before we get to those fun bits, Nick is here to tie a lovely bow on today's fun. Because software ages terribly, right? The older it is, the worse it gets, which isn't great news for any business in the digital age. Analogous to the nervous system of an organization, sharing critical information, connecting units, signals harm where needed, enterprises depend on vital and effective software. Put differently, when software becomes a problem, the health of the organization is compromised. Nick and his team at Empathy Software proposes collaborative modeling as a way to create holistic, inclusive, and robust systems for the future. Please welcome the software superstar, Nick Tune.
Hey everyone. Hope you've had a good day so far. I think the organisers have done a really amazing job. From the moment Wolfgang walked in his pajamas to make us all feel comfortable and welcome. It's been epic, and this room we're in is amazing. I think it might be haunted though. These lights have been flickering all day. I think there's a ghost. Maybe the ghost was trying to say something like, "Love your pajamas, Wolfgang." He came to my meetup a few weeks ago, and he wasn't wearing his pajamas then, though. So I think he only saves it for special occasions. But I do think that what the Intersection group is doing, Wolfgang, Milan, and all the team, I think it is important work. They're not out here trying to sell frameworks or trying to make millions. I think they genuinely have a belief that collaborative approaches to enterprise design are what the industry needs. And I think we had this conversation this morning about status quo machines. And really, the industries we work in are status quo machines. It's a status quo machine composed of status quo machines. The industry doesn't change practices all that often. And I think that's what Intersection's trying to do, trying to bring collaborative approaches and change that status quo machine. And that definitely connects with the work I've done over the past 15 years. I think collaborative approaches do work, and I'd like to share some of my experiences with you today. I think I'll stand over here. So as you can see, I've got a blue circle behind me. That means I live in the blue box on Edgy. That's my house there. I've got a background in software engineering and development. That's why I live there. Got my first programming job like 15 years ago. That got me into domain-driven design. I was always looking for what's the right way to build software, what's the best way. I went down a few dead ends. I won't get into them now, but I found domain-driven design quite early in my career. And I'm like, software developers, sitting with domain experts and other people involved in building a product, that feels like the right way to me, and the results they're producing out of this looks pretty good. Software very closely aligned to the business problem. And haven't really changed that opinion in the last 15 years. I think it's a very good approach. But I don't always live in my house, in my white house in the blue circle. Sometimes I get out of my house, and some years ago, probably 4 or 5 years ago, I was actually in New York, quite far from my house, and I was in this team with a very tense, difficult situations. There were two people, two big attitudes, two big egos in the team, both trying to push their ideas through. Neither one wanted to back down. That's probably the closest I've come to witnessing violence in a working context. It really was that bad. And it wasn't two Americans arguing over politics. It was actually an English guy and an Australian guy. So what they were arguing about was a word, a single word called activate. Why would you argue over the word activate? Basically, they both had very strong opinions about when a device should be activated. So they were working for an organization that does IoT stuff, installing these IoT devices in the streets, in New York, and rolling out to other cities. The one person was the head of QA, and he said, we have to activate these devices in the warehouse. Solution architects said, no, we have to activate these devices on the streets when they're installed. And that's when they were clashing. This was simmering away for a couple of weeks, and it came to that one meeting where it all came to the surface, and it was those two big egos coming up against each other. To begin, they both had a reason. Head of QA, he said, if we activate a device in the warehouse, we can verify problems before a device gets installed in the streets. If you install a device in the streets and there's a problem, you have to send out a truck, take it back to the warehouse and fix it. It's very expensive. Americans call it truck rolls. It's a very American phrase. We don't like our truck rolls. They're expensive. For the solution architects, his point was, we need to activate in the streets because when a device is installed, it gets configured based on the location it's installed in. If you install one of these things in Times Square, it needs different settings, different configurations to one installed in, let's say, Brooklyn. Different location, different adverts, different customizations, different support for local communities. But the crazy thing about all of this is, this whole battle they were having, none of it was necessary. They just had different definitions of this word activate. As you can see here, they didn't have this shared mental model of the problem they were trying to solve. They could have both achieved exactly what they wanted if they just got beyond the language gap. See, for the QA, he could activate in a warehouse, do all these connections and checks, and still the device could be installed anywhere. That was the architect's point. We don't want to have to install specific devices in specific locations because we create more errors. He wants the ability to be able to install any device anywhere, and it dynamically gets the configuration it needs. So all of that arguing, all of that battling, all of that creating a horrible team environment wasn't necessary in any way. There was absolutely no value to that. So we often see this on projects, this different definitions, arguing over the meaning of words, and you might say, well, people in my company aren't fighting over words, so we don't have a problem. But actually, you probably do, because as Mr. Brandolini says, we all carry around these misassumptions in our work, especially developers. And the problem is, it's your developers' misassumptions that go into your code, which goes into production. And that's problematic, and it's not sustainable because over time you get this kind of situation where people more on the business side, they're talking using certain words and phrases with different definitions. The way they think about your business is very different to what your developers model in their code. And that incurs a translation cost. If you're a developer, you're over here talking in one language and trying to figure out, so which bit of the code am I changing? That bit. It gets expensive. It gets difficult, and it becomes error-prone. And here's my friend John, another American. He's not a shouty, arguing one like those two people I mentioned earlier who weren't American anyway. He was actually working in a bank, an American bank, and he had this problem probably to the biggest degree I've ever seen, actually. So people on the projects, they had this mismatch between business language and IT language, and they were having a lot of meetings that were inefficient, a lot of arguments. They were putting bad requirements in their backlog because they didn't understand the business in a shared language. Everyone was stressed. Everyone's getting annoyed by the situation. So what John did was he created a terminology mismatch map. As you can see here, this is a very small highlight. These are the exact words they used. He said I could use it. So business language, people in the business use the word sponsor. That concept didn't exist in the code. However, the word sponsor did exist in the code, but it referred to a concept the business called a program. So as a developer, you hear the word sponsor, program. You hear the word program, something else. There's a big mismatch here. Imagine that on a much bigger scale. Now you can see why people are not able to collaborate very effectively. But something else really interesting about this he mentioned to me is that he also showed where people are aligned, like on the word product. And he explained to me, at one point in a meeting, everyone's agreeing on stuff, they're having some productivity, and then suddenly it all goes off tracks when they start using words that each other doesn't mean. So that was a really interesting dynamic where you can have some alignment but not full. And that actually kind of made things worse in some respects. So what John explained to me, this map became quite useful in a very limited context, to a limited extent. He was able to use it to show people where they weren't aligned, and just to make people aware that we're struggling to communicate, and there's this language mismatch that's kind of having some influence on that. He also explained to me another key benefit of that terminology mismatch map was the fact that a lot of people just really deeply didn't realize that they weren't aligned, and this started to make them realize, oh, we're not arguing over the word activate, we're actually arguing for different things using the same words or different words. But here's the real problem, and there's no cake involved. Over time, these misassumptions of your developers start to layer up in the code. You get new developers coming and going, different kinds of misassumptions all built on top of each other. So when you realize you have this problem, it's not a simple find and replace to fix it. It's not just the names of things that are different. It's how concepts are grouped together. It's how relationships be formed between them. It's how architectural boundaries are formed, and maybe even organizational boundaries. It's a very expensive problem to fix, and it's a very expensive problem to keep. So the best solution is to try and avoid this, try and not get to this situation. Here's an example where I'm trying to explain to a head of marketing why he's struggling to put 2 text boxes on a web page, why his developers are struggling to do that, because of this mismatch that was so bad in the company. And the point I want to make here is it affects all of us. Sales, marketing, product, whatever team you work in, if your code is so difficult to understand and work with, and it's difficult to define new requirements, you can't add new features to your product. You can't improve because the code becomes your bottleneck. And that connects with my next point. If we want to fix this problem of unsustainable software development, I don't think we can just say, developers, you've got to work harder. Let's hire smarter developers. We need to create those shared conceptual models to minimize the mismatch between how we code stuff and how we talk about stuff. And that's actually a joint problem. It's actually creating that joint model that's necessary to achieve that. So I think it affects everyone here, and I'd like to talk about a solution that you can use to maybe not completely solve it, but you can get a long way with techniques like event storming, which is collaborative modeling. So what you can see here is a workshop with some people. Those people work for the same company. Some work in different teams, some work in the same team. Some have different skills, developer, customer support, tester, product, quite a whole mix here. And what we're trying to do is create this shared model, this shared understanding of how we all see things. From there, you can go in a lot of different places, and I'll talk to you about some examples. But the basic idea is this. You get some orange Post-it notes, and you as an individual, you write down some events, some things that happen in the part of the business you work in, maybe about your customer, in their journey or internal processes, and you put them on a timeline. So if you were working in the electric vehicle charging industry, you might have some events like EV arrived at the charging station, EV plugged into the charging station, charging authorized, and charging session started, and that would continue. Alternatively, we can explore where things don't work out. We've got an alternative flow here, charging station malfunction. So we can explore happy, sad, all kinds of cases. But that's only on a small scale. What we want to achieve is everyone doing this at the same time to build this bigger picture. So then you can see the bits of the system you work in and how that fits into a much bigger picture of what everyone else is working on. That's the baseline learning experience we're trying to create here. See the bigger picture, see the work that you do that fits in, and then from there, a lot of opportunities open up, a lot of chances for solving problems, improving alignment. Even enterprise design is possible once you get to this stage. So I'll share some examples of mine, some of the benefits you can get from this. It's not exhaustive. I think the benefits are kind of limitless, really. But this first one is showing how you can use collaborative modeling to clarify some of those misassumptions that people in your team have and get them more aligned. So I was facilitating this session, and the group had built an event storm. So we're walking through the timeline, just talking about each event. And I asked, is this problem happening a lot? Is it important, basically? What I'm trying to get to is there something useful in this event that this group should talk about right now? Maybe there's more complexity, maybe there's some hidden challenges there. Let's try and dig into it and see if it's important. First response is a developer. No, it's not important. I work in that team. Doesn't happen very often. Haven't heard about that problem for ages, actually. And that's where customer support stepped in. They're like, actually, Mr. Developer, I fixed 3 of those support cases this morning. I had 3 users raising support tickets about this exact problem. It kind of happens every day. So in that moment, a developer realized, wow, that problem's actually significant. I didn't realize that. From there, we can start asking questions like, could the developers fix it? Could developers spend some time, fix that problem, and save customer support doing loads of work? Is that beneficial? We can also go a level even deeper when we have moments like this, and we can ask the question, should the developers be spending more time with customer support so that we don't get to this situation? Are they missing a feedback loop there? Collaborative modeling can also help to resolve mysteries. Not sure it can help to resolve the mystery of the flickering lights. I don't want to go that far. But in this workshop, similar situation. The group's built this nice timeline, lots of different perspectives, and we start walking through it. And we get to an interesting looking event, and I ask as a facilitator, how is this metric calculated, basically? And the developer says, yeah, we do X, Y, Z. And the head of marketing says, no, actually, we do something different. And the developer says, this time the developer wins. The developer says, I wrote the code for it, and I'm pretty sure it does work how I said. In that moment, he just got his laptop out, opened it, checked the code, and he's like, yeah, I'm right. Head of marketing is like, oh, actually, that explains why all my marketing reports are wrong. I've been using that metric in completely the wrong way. I've been trying to figure this problem out for months. What's next? So collaborative modeling can save you from a lot of waste. It can actually help you speed up your delivery. People often think, if we get together for some modeling, it's going to take a whole day or 2 days and slow us down. But you can actually discover things that speed you up. And you can even prevent your systems from becoming more complex than they need to be, which limits sustainability. In this example, one of the teams was responsible for a problem, Team A. And Team A says, yeah, we can't fix that until Team B does something for us. Team B says, yeah, we really want to help you. We're going to build an API for you, but we've got other stuff in the backlog. It's not like we can't just fix it now. We're sorry about that. Team C's like, what? We've got an API that already does that. So that was able to deliver immediately. This bottleneck was instantly removed. And they avoided building the same thing twice and making their systems more complex than they need to be. For a day of modeling, that's a pretty good return, I would say. Talked about language earlier. Event storming is a great opportunity to visualize these mismatches. Things like this come up. One group's talking about boats, one group's talking about vessels. Are they the same thing? Some people think it's the same meaning, and it's not. So event storming surfaces these problems. By having everyone together and asking everyone to put events on the wall, even if someone else has put an event and that seems the same, you visualize these divergences, these mismatches. It's also a chance to explore problems collaboratively. Once you've built an event storm, anyone in the group can start adding their problems to the wall. And the group can collaboratively solve those problems. Imagine that. You're in a workshop, someone puts a problem and says, oh, I've got a really big problem here, I've been struggling with this for ages. In that room, you've got people from all across the edgy landscape. You've got developers, architects, product, brand, identity. Who's the best person to solve this problem? Maybe it's a combination, who knows, but you've got all those different perspectives there. That is a great way to find the best solution to a problem, by having all those perspectives present. Event storming is also useful for the future state, not just the current states. With process modeling event storming, you can design new features and processes. It's an alternative to just handing over requirements to your developers. We talked earlier about this mismatch. Well, if you define the requirements together, if you map out this process together, if you design it together, you've created that shared language before you've even implemented it. And this is what goes in your code. So as someone who's not writing the code, if you want the code to match your mental model, define it together before it goes into the code. Pretty obvious in my experience. You can also use collaborative modeling for enterprise design. With an event storm, you can work as a group and start asking, what's the best way to organize these events into different areas? And these different groupings or clusterings will become your organizational boundaries and your architecture boundaries. Again, you're making these decisions with all those perspectives in the room, much more likely to arrive at the best solution. Here's an example I did with a company in Canada. This was the end of the first day. We had 60 people in this room. It was actually a whole office floor with no furniture, pretty epic for event storming. So space is important. And at the end of the first day, this group had mapped out a whole process. You can see those yellow strips that represent potential subdomains. In that workshop, we had sales, marketing, product development, QA, CEO was in there, COO was in there, CTO was there. And what's really interesting about this is that as a facilitator, I wasn't coming in as an expert consultant to tell this company, you should design your organization this way, you should design your enterprise this way. I was just helping the group through this process. They know the industry, they know the organization, they know the pains. Doesn't it make sense for them to design the enterprise together and not have some expert who's never worked in the company doing it? Seems pretty weird to me. How long do I have left? 30 seconds. Could we extend that to 5? Would that be okay? So one of the problems you'll come across, and it's usually some old school architect kind of person, no offense, but it is a bit passive aggressive, I won't camouflage it. We've already got the diagrams. Who needs to get 20 people in a room when I've got the diagrams in my desk drawer that no one's ever seen? Completely missing the point. What we're trying to achieve is learning opportunities, collective problem solving, bringing all these different perspectives together. It's not about the diagram at the end. It's not about producing something correct. It's about empowering people to have all of that knowledge. It's about building connections and getting these people to work together. And that's sustainable. These people learn how to work together. They learn about the system they're working in. And they can make good decisions on a daily basis. And they can decide, yeah, I should go and talk to that person. I know them. They live in a different part of Edgy, but that's okay. We don't treat them as silos. And actually, what I found is these collaborative modeling workshops can actually change people's mind. People aren't always fixed in this old school mindset. This example is from a bank in the UK. Me and my friend Sophie, she's a product owner from Hungary. We did this event storming session. And we got there in the morning, and there was a service designer sat next to me. What's this about? Do we need to be here for a whole day? Is it a waste of time? Are you going to waste my time today? She wasn't happy to be there. Don't think she was convinced by the idea. But that changed pretty quickly. A couple of hours into the session, she was actually facilitating most of the interactions. She was getting involved. She was actually cool. Kind of started liking her. And at the end of the day, she escorted me and Sophie out of the building on good terms after the workshop. And she was like talking for 15 minutes. She was like, oh, I've wanted to explore this topic for ages. We got stuck in this day-to-day, doing the next bit of work in the project, but I work at this bank because not because I want to help the bank deliver its services, but I want to help people beyond what we just do as a bank to be more socially responsible and helpful. And this workshop today enabled that to happen. We spoke about those topics. And from that moment, I think she saw the value in these workshops. So that's basically it for this talk. I'm just going to quickly wrap up. 30 seconds, I think.
Beautiful, Nick. Thank you. Big round of applause. And we should honor this with some questions. What's on your mind? Pass this on, please.
Thanks, Nick. I'm not sure if you touched on this, but was just interested, how does this relate to PR planning? Where do you think it fits into the world of PR planning? Because there's very similar activities that occurs at a PR level. Do you think it comes before this? And at what level, the team, the tribe, the solution, or the journey, where have you found success?
I think it's important to think about this from different perspectives. We've got collaborative modeling as an idea, and we've got event storming as an example of how to do collaborative modeling. So if we go back to the principles at the start of the talk, I think we need to ask the question, what perspectives need to be available? I think we need to go from talking about when to use a technique to identifying what are the specific needs we have right now. So for every meeting, I think you need to be asking the question, who should be here? And what will happen if we don't invite certain people? In terms of event storming itself, yeah, you can use it at different levels of granularity. So I think it will depend on your company culture, the people involved, whether they're willing to try it. But yeah, you can do collaborative modeling at any level of granularity. And sometimes it goes beyond specific levels of abstraction. With event storming, for example, we can go up and down as we need to. We might start at high level and zoom into particular areas. In the context of PI planning itself, it's not something I typically see get involved in that often, so I couldn't really say too much about that.
We're currently exploring this in my company, and we've been sort of struggling with different definitions and different terminology. So we sort of had it go like a year ago, and then it didn't really crashed and burned. And now we have another go since we have sort of structured our way of thinking around architecture and also like shared language and all those topics. But one thing that I'm wondering about, have you been able to sort of sustain these type of events flows or whatever you call them, models over time, so that you can revisit them like the next time you want to do change or the next time? Or is it more of a spare of the moment thing, you get it on the wall, you see what you do and then you go and do it and then that's it?
Yeah, so I think the challenge of how do you build these models and keep them and evolve them over time is not really a solved problem yet. I'm not going to try and sell that solution to you today.
I'm very curious if you could.
But I think it's difficult, and I think it's also important to recognize that when you have an event storming session, what goes on the wall isn't the whole truth. It's just what these people in this room decided to put on the wall today. Could be stuff missing, could be different levels of granularity. And in terms of once you've used the session to build a language, how to sustain it, again, I'm seeing a lot of people trying to solve that problem. Personally, I would say getting together regularly to do these sessions is a great way to refresh often. When you're building new features, using things like process modeling, you're defining the requirements in a way that looks kind of how your code will look. The concepts can move that way. So bringing collaboration to the requirements. And there is a tool that someone's working on called contexture. His name's Chris Simon. He's an Australian guy, and he's trying to solve this problem in a more robust way. And he's building a system where you can define language and examples, so you can store that somewhere. He stores it by the code at the moment, and what he's working on is some system that will prompt people regularly in Slack, like, hey, you just used the word sponsor. Does it still mean this? So, yeah, I don't think it's a sole problem, but I do see a lot of interest in this space.
So thank you for this session. Amazing, really great talk. Thank you for that. We have 90 people in this room, and enterprise design comes more from a strategic, higher level. Yeah? We talk about sustainable enterprises and how can we change and create better enterprises on a high level, right? And we have 90 people here, and that's not bad. But the biggest domain-driven design conference, they have 1,500. So there must be 10,000. There's more people working on the ground in everyday's frustrated software development projects. And my big question is, how can we make finally this vertical connection between those edgy, higher level, all the three facets and all these amazing thinkers we have here today with reality? Yes?
Okay, I did have an extended version of the talk, in case I spoke too quickly. You didn't miss much, don't worry. But I think the point of building communities and spreading ideas is the challenge there. If you go to a domain-driven design conference or something, domain-driven design, you'll get a lot of people who are interested in these ideas. And as you said, 1,500 people at a domain-driven design conference, why are they not coming here? I think that's about getting the message out there. Me personally, obviously I'm from domain-driven design, saw what you're trying to achieve with intersection, and to me, matches with what I've seen working and what I think is a good way to work. So obviously I was happy to come here today. So I think perseverance. You came to our meetup in London a couple of weeks ago. People liked it. People were talking about that on social media. And I think that's what I was trying to get across here. There's actually a collaborative modeling unconference that's held in Vienna. I think it's is it Europa House, not far from here. And it's mostly people coming from DDD who want to do more collaborative modeling. And one of the big talking points that came up was, wouldn't it be great if there was more non-developers here, some UX and some product people? So I do think there are people out there who want to do this. I think it's trying to mobilize this community to go out there and do more connecting of dots. I think that's the key. I think the idea is good. I think there are people who would like it. It's just...
Yeah, maybe that's my bottom line. Yeah, we must bring the story better across for the ordinary people. No, ordinary, no, that's not what I wanted to say. For the people working in the reality of intense and not always happy and good software projects, right? That's the reality.
Could you repeat that? Sorry.
We must find a way to tell our story, convey it for the people doing the actual work in always frustrating software development projects. Yeah, there's a lot of legacy, there's a lot of problems that we can see from high above, yeah, like terminology in the code. That seems to be a trivial problem from above, right? But it's their reality. We must get better in conveying our story for them.
One of the extended features that I was going to talk about was this. Something I see quite a lot is we'd like to do an event storming session, and it's like, oh, UX has already done some user journey mapping. Do we still need to do event storming? It feels very much like an awkward dance between the different parts of Edgy. What I was kind of hoping we can get to is a situation where we've changed the status quo, where people understand that collaborative modeling is a good approach. And so that's the first question. Are we in a situation where collaborative modeling makes sense? If so, what's the right technique to use? So I think that's one of the messages I've always been trying to get out there. Did I answer your question there, or did I? Okay.
To be continued. So final applause for today. Thank you so much. We're warm, we're tired, we're hungry. It's time to wrap up today. And before I do that, I want to say thank you so much to all the speakers who poured their heart into preparing these points of views. Thank you for enlightening us and sharing your perspectives. It's been absolutely wonderful, and I can't wait for even more of this tomorrow.